Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargav. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. The bizarre case of Chitra Ramakrishna, the former managing director and CEO of the NSE, who ran the country's top bourse under the advice of an incognito Himalayan yogi who she says that she had never met, but yet actively communicated with him through emails and with whom she shared the most sensitive and confidential information about the NSE, which included details about its organization structure, its dividend scenario, its financial results, its business projections, its HR policy, its response to regulators, etc. This case is proving to be a laughing stock and is too difficult to accept in terms of corporate governance, in terms of regulatory compliance and management of an entity which is packed with the most influential and prominent persons of corporate and what we call Babu India, and whose own misconduct is very apparent from the ongoing investigations by various agencies. The SEBI order in this case to us is not just about the failure of Chitra Ramakrishna, but of the entire power-packed board of directors and the top management of the NSE. What the SEBI order says about her applies to all of them too, and it says that Chitra Ramakrishna failed to maintain the highest standards of personal integrity, truthfulness, honesty and fortitude in discharging her duties, and she engaged in acts discreditable to her responsibilities as the managing director and CEO of the NSE, and her conduct has been of dishonesty and misrepresentation by making incorrect and misleading submissions about the unknown person, which is the Himalayan yogi that she refers to, before the SEBI in her case before it. The former SEBI chairman M. Damodaran thus comments that the board of the NSE, its nomination and remuneration committee, its public interest directors, its chief regulatory officer, its company secretary, and other members of its senior management team have all played their part in perpetuating the unhealthy situation that existed in the NSE. The fact that all these men of high eminence were paid crores of rupees under the garb of fees for attending board meetings, for collectively doing a callous and perfunctory job, speaks volumes of their own negligence and thus to us passive collusion, which let a Himalayan yogi run the NSE. If the co-location and algo trading scam of the NSE had not broken out, and if the whistleblower had not complained about the appointment, remuneration, promotion and posting of one Anand Subramaniam, a most unfit and inappropriate person as a group operating officer of the NSE and advisor to its CEO under the advice of a yogi, then perhaps this gross misconduct at the NSE would have continued for many more years, and it would not have led to Chitra's resignation in December 2016. And that too, ironically, at that time, she was given an honorable exit and a severance package of almost 45 crore rupees when she resigned, despite all her misconduct. The recent SEBI order has fueled the ongoing investigation against Chitra Ramakrishna, with CBI having expanded its current investigation into the co-location scam of preferential access to NSE's algo trading platform, which unjustly and illegally benefited a select few. The CBI investigation has now been extended and Chitra Ramakrishna and the others are being questioned. The CBI questioned Chitra for long hours, as also her former advisor Anand Subramaniam, and has also issued a lookout circular to ensure that neither of them is able to leave the country. The CBI has not mentioned her as an accused so far, and its investigation continues, and so does the investigation by the Income Tax Department, which also raided her to check and gather evidence in connection with charges of alleged financial irregularities and tax evasion, and to also ascertain the reasons for her multiple suspicious trips to tax havens like Mauritius, Seychelles, Singapore and Hong Kong during and after her tenure as the NSE chief. The business line says that there are indications that even the enforcement directorate may be roped in order to look into any foreign exchange violations that would have occurred. with Chitra steadfastly maintaining in her submissions that she actively sought advice from the unknown Yogi and also shared the most confidential NSE information with him. It is truly not much of an exaggeration when Kiran Mazumdar, the executive chairperson of Biocon, says that a Yogi ran India's top exchange as a puppet master. Shocking lack of governance, she says, in NSE that was held up as a world-class stock exchange then. She asks, were there no checks and balances in the NSE? We don't think this is an exaggerated comment from her. While the current investigation by the CBI, Income Tax Department, SEBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, etc., shows the utter lack of checks and balances in NSE then, you would not have thought so if you saw the impressive 224-page glossy annual report of the NSE for the financial year 2015-16, when the reign of Chitra Ramakrishna was at its peak at the NSE. As per the report, NSE was a world-class stock exchange with top-class management and the best management practices according to it, with the best of men in its board of directors and the top team of its management. Here are some experts and some extracts from that annual report which actually show what it claimed to be, but what it was actually not. The report says that the board of directors of NSE, who kept little check on its managing director and CEO and who were perhaps negligently unaware of her misconduct and also of the co-location algo scam, included Ashok Chawla as its director and as its chairman, and he happens to be a former Finance Secretary of India and is a retired senior IAS officer. The other director was a gentleman called Naveed Masood, again a retired IAS officer, and who at one time was a contender for the post of being the Cabinet Secretary of India, which happens to be the topmost babu of the country. The next director was Dinesh Kanabar, a senior chartered accountant and the then vice chairman of KPMG India. The other director was Dharmesha Rawal, former executive director of SEBI itself. The next one was Prakash Parthasarathy, founder, CIO and managing partner of Premji Invest. And there was TV Mohandas Pai, a chartered accountant and former CFO of Infosys. So this was a power-packed board of directors who turned out to be negligent. The report then says that NSE was packed with an extensive top management team that included two CFOs. It included a group president and a company secretary. It included a group operating officer, a chief regulatory officer, a CMO, a CPO, a CTO, a CBO, a COO, and a CBO, among others. So many C-suite executives. It then says that the mandatory public interest directors of NSE included yet another bunch of very prominent men, including Sri S.B. Mathur, former chairman of LIC. It included Sri Y.S. Maligam, a well-known senior chartered accountant, and retired Justice Sri B.N. Sri Krishna. It further mentions that the total amount paid to these men of eminence for attending board meetings and board committee meetings of the NSE during that year totaled to about 2 crore rupees just for attending meetings. It says that the remuneration paid to Chitra Ramakrishna alone was about 9.12 lakh crores, and to her unfit and totally inexperienced advisor and group operating officer Anand Subramaniam was rupees 4.62 crores. The report then mentions that the NSE was packed with an extensive top management team that included two CFOs, a group president and a company secretary, a group operating officer, a chief regulatory officer, a chief marketing officer, a chief people's officer, a CTO, a CVO, a COO, a CBO, among many others. Those were the number of senior, highly qualified executives it had. It then mentions that the mandatory public interest directors of the NSE included yet another bunch of very prominent men, including Sri S.B. Mathur, former chairman of LIC, Sri Y.S. Maligam, a well-known senior chartered accountant, and retired Justice Sri B.N. Sri Krishna. The report then says that the total amount paid to these men of eminence for attending board meetings and board committee meetings of the NSE during that year totaled to about 2 crore rupees. That was the amount paid to them just for attending board meetings. The remuneration paid to Chitra Ramakrishna alone was 9.12 crores, and to her unfit and totally inexperienced advisor and group operating officer Anand Subramaniam was 4.62 crores. His annual salary, incidentally, at Bama Lorry before he joined NSE was just about 15 lakh rupees per year. At NSE, it shot up to 4.62 crores. The report then mentions that in the matter of internal financial controls, the controls that are there in NSE are in the form of maker-checker system controls, information security controls, etc. These controls, it says, are periodically reviewed by the internal auditors in order to establish their adequacy and effectiveness. We really don't think that was happening. The annual report then says that the NSE has a former annual evaluation of the performance by the board of its own performance and that of its committee and individual directors. It says that the performance of the board is evaluated on the basis of various governance and business related parameters and corporate governance standards, which according to it include commitment to highest ethical standards of integrity and probity and understanding of the objectives, values, vision and business of NSE. It then mentions that NSE's vigil mechanism is for its directors and employees to report instances of unethical conduct, actual or suspected fraud, or violation of the company's code of conduct or ethics policy or law. It is worth noting that despite key proceedings not being recorded in the minutes of the board of directors and Anand Subramaniam not being disclosed as a key management person of the NSE, which he truly was, its secretarial auditor yet gave the NSE and its board of directors a clean chit. And finally, there are extensive and impressive statements about the responsibilities of the board of directors of the NSE in this annual report, which now look to be a farce and clearly fail to impress. While it is too early in the day to conclude about Chitra Ramakrishna's failure on truth, integrity and honesty, which will be clear only after the CBI, after the Income Tax Department and the Enforcement Directorate conclude their probe in the matter, what is now clear is the utter negligence of the board of NSE and its top management team to supervise and restrain Chitra Ramakrishna. We have seen that kind of a situation happen too often now. It is the oft-repeated story of a powerful CEO with strong connects in Delhi and a fawning and subservient board of directors which is complacent and negligently collusive and failing in its own mandatory expected due diligence, probity and vigilance. We saw that in the case of ICICI Bank. We saw that in the case of ILFS. We saw it in the case of Yes Bank. And now we see it in the case of NSE. And the misconduct of Chitra Ramakrishna is not minor or insignificant by any measure. The most significant thing in a stock exchange is information on the basis of which fortunes are made and lost. And that is what she compromised with the so-called Himalayan Yogi. And to prevent any trail leading to him or from him being found, her laptop and that of Anand Subramaniam was strangely junked and destroyed by NSE itself. To us, this probe by the CBI, by the ED and by the Income Tax Department is just the starting of what will turn out to be an extremely criminal misconduct that took place in the NSE. This is Akhilesh Bhargav signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.